Welcome to the Full Tracy Money Audio Commentary. This is Owen Tracy recording. It's 4:14 p.m. that is Central Time, and today is September 23rd. Well, we had quite an eventful day today. There's a lot of speculation going around in the silver market. I'll address that in a minute. But then we've also had some statements from the central bank in Brazil saying they're not going to cut interest rates. They're going to hold them at a high level for a persistent amount of time. They would not hesitate to continue to raise interest rates in the event that inflation doesn't go back to where they want it. That's what you would expect from an independent central bank. When we talk about independence from central banks elsewhere, they do a lot of talking. But the reality is that if you just look at the decisions that they make relative to the kinds of pressures that they come under from politics, regardless of which side of the aisle that comes from, we have plenty of evidence that the central bank in the USA tends to cut interest rates in the fourth year of the presidential cycle. And if you don't describe that as political in nature, then I think that it's very hard to come up with a different rationale. Because I think when we think about Brazil, there is one point that is particularly important for the central bank, and it is that they can't trust the political class. It's not all that long ago that every member of the government was potentially at risk of being put in jail for graft. And they did such an exhaustive examination of how many people had their hands out for bribes that by the time it came to what they would do in terms of prosecutions, they found out that they would basically have to put the entire political establishment in jail. Well, that was one of the primary reasons why Bolsonaro won the last election. And now he lost two elections ago. Then Lula was told that he would never be allowed to run for office again. And that didn't last very long. And he was brought back in during the last election. So this is an additional point I think is particularly important. We can look at a country like Brazil where you have someone who was very clearly implicated in graft, was told that he would never be allowed to run for office again, and then the population put him back in power. Blaming politicians is only half the job. You have to blame yourself as well if you're going to vote for somebody like that. But having an independent central bank, which is fully aware that it doesn't matter who you have in power, then the risk of inflation is ever present because they're going to spend with abandon regardless of what you do. Well, then they have to hold interest rates high. And this, I think, is an object lesson for what we should be looking at from the rest of the world. Because at least in Brazil, you have an independent central bank. And when you look at what's going on in the rest of the world, they're cutting interest rates, despite the fact that inflation has not gone back to target.